Welcome to the Digital Intellect, bringing you the latest news from around the world. On a humid Saturday in June 2025, Cairo's usual chaos was pierced by a chilling whisper. The government had stopped the Nile. The city, always alive with the constant hum of traffic, the shouts of street vendors, and the laughter of children, suddenly felt as if it had been plunged into an uneasy silence. The air, thick with summer heat, seemed to grow heavier as the news spread. The news spread instantly, on phones, radios, and TVs, leaving the city in stunned silence. In every corner of Cairo, people stopped what they were doing, their faces lit by the blue glow of screens or the static of old radios. Conversations faltered, and a sense of disbelief rippled through the crowds. The Aswan High Dam had halted the river's flow, a move officials called a last resort. The mighty Nile, which had flowed for millennia, was now still, its waters trapped behind concrete and steel, its bed exposed to the harsh sun. For a moment, Cairo froze. Faces in cafes and taxis reflected disbelief and fear. The city's rhythm, usually so relentless, was broken. Even the ever-present honking of horns seemed to fade, replaced by anxious whispers and worried glances. The Nile wasn't just water, it was Egypt's lifeblood. For centuries, it had nourished crops, carried fishermen's boats, and shaped the daily rituals of millions. Its absence was unthinkable, a wound at the heart of the nation. The government blamed upstream threats, especially Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, framing the shutdown as a show of resolve. Officials spoke of national security and the need to protect Egypt's future, but their words felt cold and distant to many. But for millions, the official words felt distant. The river that defined their civilization was suddenly gone. Families gathered by the riverbank, staring at the cracked mud where water once flowed, struggling to comprehend the enormity of what had happened. As dusk fell, panic replaced routine. People rushed to stores, hoarding water and food. Supermarkets overflowed with anxious shoppers, shelves emptied in minutes, and the city's sense of order began to fray at the edges. Government reassurances were met with skepticism. Rumors of a prolonged crisis or secret military action spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with speculation, and every new message seemed to deepen the sense of uncertainty. The river, once a symbol of continuity, now fueled anxiety and uncertainty. The sight of empty boats and dry riverbeds haunted the city, a stark reminder of how quickly life could change. The city's pulse skipped. Egypt was holding its breath. Night fell, but sleep was elusive. People stood on balconies, gazing out at the silent city, searching for answers in the darkness. The day the Nile stopped, fear flowed in its place. In homes across Cairo, families huddled together, children asking questions their parents couldn't answer. The uncertainty seeped into every conversation, every glance out the window. The shutdown was more than a policy, it was a rupture in the nation's soul. Tahrir Square, usually alive with energy, stood deserted, while crowds gathered quietly at the river's edge, united in their grief and confusion. The silence along the riverbanks was louder than any protest. Even those who tried to raise their voices found themselves overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment, their banners fluttering in the still air. Egypt waited, uncertain if the river, or normal life, would return. As dawn broke over the city, hope mingled with fear. The people of Cairo stood together, watching and waiting, their future as uncertain as the silent river before them. Panic radiated from Cairo, the heart of Egypt, where the city's usual energy had been replaced by a heavy, suffocating tension. The streets, once alive with the sounds of daily life, now echoed with uncertainty and fear. The anxiety spread outward, reaching the fertile Nile Delta, where farmers watched in disbelief as their irrigation canals dried up, the lifeblood of their fields vanishing before their eyes. For these families, the shutdown wasn't just a distant political crisis. It was a direct threat to their survival, a daily struggle to keep their crops and livestock alive as the land withered. In the south, fishermen pulled their wooden boats ashore, mourning the river that had fed their families for generations. The receding water left them stranded, their livelihoods slipping away with the current. The Nile's steady rhythm had shaped Egypt for millennia, dictating the rise and fall of empires. Now, its absence awakened ancient fears of famine, of chaos, of a world turned upside down. In rural villages, elders gathered in hushed circles, whispering of old prophecies and omens. Many saw the shutdown as a dangerous break with nature, a sign that the balance sustaining their world was unraveling. In the cities, chaos erupted. Supermarkets and bakeries were overrun as shelves emptied and lines stretched around the block. The fear of hunger drove people to desperation, fueling a sense of collective panic. Government officials pleaded for calm, but their words were drowned out by the rising tide of fear and frustration. The people demanded answers, but none were forthcoming. Crowds gathered on bridges, staring in disbelief at the exposed riverbed. They pointed at the shrinking river, imagining a future where its banks turned to dust and memories of abundance faded. The government's drastic move had unleashed a panic it could no longer control. Security forces struggled to calm the agitated crowds, but the fear was too deep, too widespread. The silence of the Nile echoed through every home and field, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Families sat together in the gathering dusk, their faces etched with worry and uncertainty. The nation teetered on the edge, its ancient lifeline severed. The parched landscape told a story of crisis, of a people pushed to their limits. In government halls, officials faced impossible choices. The shutdown was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort with everything at stake: Egypt's future, its people, its very soul. Egypt's ancient fears had become its present reality. The land of the Nile, once a symbol of life and renewal, now stood on the brink, haunted by the specter of its own history. The Nile is Egypt's heart, its only true source of life, a ribbon of blue that cuts through endless desert, bringing hope and sustenance to millions. For centuries, its waters have been the reason Egypt exists at all, shaping the land and the people who call it home. The river is the wellspring of its civilization, the silent witness to the rise and fall of pharaohs, and the inspiration behind countless myths and legends carved in stone. For over 5,000 years, the Nile's annual floods transformed barren desert into fertile farmland, making the impossible possible. These life-giving waters shaped every aspect of Egyptian culture, from the food they ate to the gods they worshipped. Its waters fed the land, inspired art and myth, and defined the nation's identity. The river was a muse for poets, a playground for children, and a source of endless stories passed down through generations. Even after the Aswan High Dam tamed its unpredictable floods, the Nile remained Egypt's main artery, supplying over 95% of its fresh water. The dam changed the river's rhythm, but not its importance. Nearly all Egyptians live along its narrow, fertile banks, relying on it for food, work, and transport. The river sustains agriculture, fishing, and provides a lifeline for bustling cities and quiet villages alike. It supports tourism, bustling markets, and the daily rituals of millions, pillars of the economy, and the rhythm of everyday life. Halting its flow was more than a political act. It was a cultural and psychological shock that rippled through every community. The river's absence was felt in every home, every field, every heart. The shutdown severed a bond unbroken for generations, leaving behind silence where there was once laughter and life. Egyptians felt as if their heart had stopped beating, as if the very soul of their nation had been taken away. The river's absence was a violation of history and hope, a reminder of how deeply Egypt's fate is tied to the Nile, its ancient lifeline. The government's message was clear and relentless. Halting the Nile was a painful necessity. Officials blamed Ethiopia's dam and failed negotiations, insisting Egypt's water rights were under threat. The shutdown was framed as a non-violent warning, a show of unity and resolve. Domestically, it was meant to rally the nation. Internationally, to force urgent intervention. Egypt gambled that the world would act to prevent disaster. The river became a bargaining chip in a high-stakes diplomatic game. The move was desperate, dangerous, and unprecedented. The effects were immediate and brutal. The Nile receded, fields yellowed, and irrigation canals ran dry. Fish died in shrinking pools, birds abandoned their habitats. The ecosystem, finely balanced for millennia, was thrown into chaos. In cities, water rationing upended daily life. Families queued for hours, storing every drop. The agricultural sector collapsed, threatening food security and livelihoods. Prices soared, and the poorest suffered most. The fishing industry vanished overnight. Tourism and transport ground to a halt. The government's gamble inflicted deep wounds on land, people, and economy. Egypt's dependence on the Nile had never been so stark or so perilous. Egypt's move sent shockwaves across Africa and the world. Ethiopia condemned the shutdown as aggression, vowing not to yield on its dam. Sudan, caught in the middle, faced its own water crisis and pleaded for relief. The United Nations and world powers called for restraint, fearing war over water. The Suez Canal's security and global trade were suddenly at risk. News of withering fields and panicked cities dominated headlines. The crisis exposed the fragility of regional trust and cooperation. The world saw the Nile's power and its peril. Diplomacy became urgent, but solutions seemed distant. The river's silence threatened to ignite a wider catastrophe. After 12 tense days, Egypt reopened the dam under global pressure. Relief swept the nation as water returned, but the scars remained. Billions lost in crops and jobs, ecosystems shattered, trust eroded. The shutdown shattered the illusion of the Nile's permanence. Egyptians now lived with a new anxiety. Their lifeline could be cut at any moment. The government claimed victory, but many felt betrayed and used. The crisis sparked a new wave of diplomacy, with the world demanding real solutions. Old treaties were no longer enough. The status quo was broken. The shutdown forced all sides to confront hard truths. The Nile's future would be shaped by the lessons of these lost days. The river flowed again, but nothing was the same. Egypt's wounds would take years to heal. A new chapter, uncertain but necessary, was beginning. The Nile crisis was a warning to the world. Rivers cannot be owned or weaponized. Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia's destinies are bound by the water they share. Only cooperation, not conflict, can secure the river's future. A binding, equitable agreement is essential for all. Science, transparency, and shared management must replace suspicion and rivalry. The lesson is global water wars threaten us all, but shared stewardship can save us. The Nile's flow now depends on wisdom, not power. Its future, and that of millions, hangs in the balance.